pencil neck, globalist banker who hasn't lived in Canada for decades and who has been seen associating with international criminals, mafia types from China and the Communist Party of China, comes back to Canada and tells a 34-year police veteran that he can't keep the firearms he legally purchased because other people are committing crimes. And somehow this pencil neck banker who's never had any experience with police work decides he knows what's best for Canada. Does that sound right to you? Welcome to my channel, y'all. I hope you're having a great day. Yesterday in a press conference, Mark Carney came out with his plan to get tough on crime, but he's only getting tough on law-abiding citizens, and he's lying about Pierre Poilievre. First, let's go to a statement he made about Pierre Poilievre, and then we'll talk about it.
Criminals are trying to illegally import guns to Canada. Pierre Poilievre is trying to import irresponsible American-style gun laws into our country.
Now I want to ask you, Mark Carney, where did you come up with that? Who fed you that line of BS, or are you just pulling it out of thin air? I think you're just pulling it out of thin air. It's something for the campaign, and the campaign only, because it is a complete lie. Nowhere has Pierre ever said he's going to import American-style gun laws. We don't have the Second Amendment here in Canada. We probably should, but we don't. And he has not said he's going to eliminate licensing, which is the cornerstone of our Canadian firearms laws. So, Mark Carney, you're a liar. I'm calling you out for that. You are completely distorting the facts, and you're only doing this to win the election. Every election cycle, the Liberals roll this gun platform out, which is complete hogwash, and they try to convince people who have little to no knowledge of firearms that this is a good thing, that this will solve crime. But tell me, how will it solve crime to remove firearms from people who don't commit crimes? This is complete lunacy. But Mark Carney, he doesn't care about Canadians. He's not even really a Canadian himself, if you think about it. Sure, technically he is. He was born here. He grew up here. But he spent a great deal of his time abroad, and he holds 2 other passports. And he has property in the United States. Where do you think he'll go if he loses the election? He won't stay in Canada. He'll be in the United States, the country he's trashing because of the tariffs and its gun laws. He's not going to stay in Canada. But the rest of us have to live with everything he's doing now, and if he's elected, everything he'll do then. Let's go now to what he specifically said about firearms and the theft from law-abiding citizens that his government is planning to carry out.
You can't be serious about being tough on crime if you're not willing to be tough on guns. You can't be serious about stopping intimate partner violence without being serious about gun control.
He's talking about a blanket tough on guns and gun control when he should be talking about illegal guns, people who possess firearms illegally. The people who possess firearms legally are not the problem. They're not the ones committing the crimes. Statistically, they are the least likely of the population to commit crimes. And we already have very tough gun control laws in Canada. In fact, licensing is very strict. And that should be really the only gun control that we need, because as long as you're a law-abiding citizen, as long as you're a person who does not commit crimes, then your possession of a firearm is of no threat to anybody else. But Mark Carney doesn't think that way.
When we know from our own tragic history how often guns are involved, we are taking action, all while respecting the long-standing traditions of hunting and sports shooting and respecting the traditions of Indigenous peoples.
Well, that's clearly another lie, because there's a lot of sport shooting in Canada that has been crippled by the Liberal gun laws. You can't get any people joining IPSC, for example, because nobody can buy a handgun anymore. So if you didn't have a handgun prior to that ban, you're not joining IPSC, no matter how much you want to. And what about three-gun competitions where they use AR-15s or DSS, dynamic shooting sport? They also use AR-15s in that. Those sports in Canada have effectively been crippled because even though they adjusted after the first ban, all of the firearms that they were using then have been since banned as well. So for him to say that they're respecting the rights and the traditions of sport shooters in Canada is a complete lie.
If elected, my government will automatically revoke gun licenses for individuals convicted of violent offenses, including intimate partner violence.
If elected, that's what he'll do. Well, I've got news for you. That already happened. So scratch that off his list of future accomplishments. It's already occurring.
We will strengthen firearms licensing and the so-called yellow and red flag laws that keep weapons out of the hands of those who are a risk to themselves or others.
Again, that already happens for the legal firearm users because we already have those red flag and yellow flag laws. And people who are a risk to themselves or others have their firearms taken away from them. But there is a fact that he's totally ignoring here. And this comes straight from the Canadian government. I did a video on this probably about 6 or 7 months ago now, possibly even a year ago, where I analyzed everything that all of these gun grabbers are saying about protecting people. And the fact is, the presence of a firearm in a house of a law-abiding citizen, a licensed gun owner, does not increase the possibility of suicide or violence with that gun. That is a fact, and it comes straight from the Canadian government. I'll link that previous video in the show notes below.
We will invest in the RCMP's National Forensic Laboratories in Ottawa and Surrey and the Saskatchewan Ballistics Lab to increase our capacity to track down guns used in crimes.
So after years of government cuts, they finally decide to properly finance the RCMP and their laboratories. Well, they created a problem, and now, because it's an election time, they're presenting a solution. It's just because it's an election time, people. That's all this is about.
We will quickly, and I mean quickly, reinvigorate the buyback of assault-style firearms and leave the classification of new firearm models to the RCMP, to the experts, not to the gun industry.
So in one breath, he actually contradicts himself. The firearms that were listed on these prohibition orders have not been classified by the RCMP or reclassified as prohibited. That was a decision by the government, by Trudeau. And then he says, oh, we're going to leave the classification of firearms to the RCMP, the experts. Well, these actually aren't experts. The people that they hire to classify firearms, those are people they train to a certain standard. They train them to be the so-called experts. They have no expertise outside of what the RCMP has told them or trained them to be. So experts? I don't think so. They have a narrow focus of training, and they're trained for political purposes. They're not real experts. But this guy is trying to tell you that they are so that he can justify putting it in the hands of these so-called experts to classify firearms so that you can't use firearms that you like legally.
No new guns should come into this country before they have been examined and classified by those experts. We must stem the tide of illegal guns and drugs coming across our border with the United States.
That's the only thing he said here that makes any sense at all. But this is what Pierre Poilievre has been saying all along, and this is what Trump is forcing us to do. So this is not his idea. This is another example of his plagiarism and his stealing of, well, pretty much everybody else's idea. He's got nothing original here.
That's why the government is now deploying scanners, drones, helicopters, additional personnel, and canine teams at our border. And we will build on this foundation by recruiting 1,000 more RCMP personnel and increasing the pay for cadet recruits.
So they created a problem. They underfunded the RCMP and they got rid of scanners. Trudeau actually got rid of scanners and didn't employ all of the equipment that he had on hand for this purpose. But knowing that an election was coming, they created a problem. They created a problem that Donald Trump had to address, and they knew he was going to address it. So now they can fight this problem. They can bring it up as an election issue. And on top of that, they're bribing new RCMP recruits by saying they're going to increase the pay. This should have been happening all along. And a lot of these things are Pierre Poilievre's ideas, and he has been speaking about this for a long time now. But now that pencil-necked Mark Carney is running for prime minister, these are all his ideas. He's trying to buy votes, people, and he's a very dangerous man.
We will train 1,000 new, 1,000 new CBSA officers and support their work with even more scanners, more drones, and more canine teams.
Well, just a reminder here, Pierre says he wants about at least 2,000 more and expand their duties so that they can cover the entire border, not just the ports of entry. So Mark Carney's solution are only about half of what Pierre Poilievre wants to do to secure the border.
We will allow police to seize fentanyl and other contraband through Canada Post mail.
Here's where my experience actually comes in. I have dealt with Canada Post in the past, and I have seized drugs that have been transported through the Canada Post. And guess what? If there are drugs being transported through Canada Post, that's considered illegitimate mail, and police can already seize it. If they have proof that it's there, they can seize it. They're not going to be able to open it without a warrant unless there's exigent circumstances and reasonable probable grounds. But that already exists. So his proposal here is something that really already exists. It's a nothing burger.
We will strengthen the public prosecution services of Canada to hold those who profit from criminal activity to account.
They will strengthen the prosecution service in Canada? Well, that's a joke. They've weakened it for the past 10 years. And, well, pretty much every time they've been in power before that as well. No, they've created a problem, and now they're presenting a solution, and it's only to get elected. All of these proposals are to get elected. They mean nothing. After the election, they will fall short on every single promise. Pierre Poilievre, on the other hand, actually means what he says, and his proposals make a lot of sense. But there could be another reason why Mark Carney wants to disarm us. It could be that something evil is coming. And if you look back in history, this is not too far-fetched, because almost every time in the history of the world where governments have disarmed their populations, evil things have happened. You can go back to the middle of the 20th century. You can go back far beyond that. And you will see that so many times in history, governments have disarmed their populations and then they have done something completely evil. Hundreds of millions of people over the history of the world have been subjugated by their governments after they have been disarmed. And hundreds of millions of people have been actually murdered by their government after they have been disarmed. So what's coming? What are they going to be doing to us that they don't want us to be able to react to? 15-minute cities, digital ID, digital currency, complete control of our lives? These are concerns that a lot of people have. These are concerns that I have. But what are your concerns? Put your comments down below, and while you're at it, please like this video, share with your friends and on social media. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel and hit that bell notification so you never miss another video. Also, please join me at 6 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday evenings on both YouTube and Rumble for my live stream, where you're invited to join in on the conversation. Next week's live stream will likely be in an hour, possibly even more than an hour early, as I'm going to live stream the debate, the English debate, and it'll be kind of a watch party. So I encourage you to join in on that. Finally, if you wish to get your Canadian firearms license, I teach the required course. So if you reside on Vancouver Island and you want to take a course from me, there are links in the show notes of this video to my website where you can sign up for one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.